All right, guys. So the next one on the last post I posted about the mistake gap. The next one, number 5, is the perfection gap. Okay, so the perfection gap is really you want to find the best plan before you take action. So you want every aspect, everything kind of planned out, mapped out. Uh, every single step needs to be perfect before you make a move. And I've seen this actually a lot, uh, just in my surroundings, peers and stuff like that. They're always waiting to have that perfect plan before they do anything. Like, and everything just has to work out 100% perfectly, every obstacle. And that's, to an extent, that's not a bad thing. You want to plan, and then you want to, dive that plan. So you want to dive the dive. So you want to deep dive that plan, right? So, um, that's it's an important thing, but you also got to keep in mind that a lot of the times, like they say, a plan does not survive first contact. So as soon as you start to execute that plan, nothing that you planned really works out the way you planned, right? So that perfection gap is actually just a hindrance of actually taking any action at all. I've been there. And I knew the importance of planning and preparation, two very key aspects. But during that planning, there's also has to be movement simultaneously. Your plans actually adjust according to the response of an event. That's actually how I've found that planning should work, as opposed to mapping out start to end, and thinking that everything's gonna lay out the way it is. And there's two problems with that. One problem is, first of all, you won't get started. That's not number one problem. The second problem with that is when things don't work out as planned. A lot of people, myself, I've been there, right? You have this defeatist attitude about it, and you're like, oh well, it's not going to work out because, well, it didn't work out according to plan. So when you're trying to get this perfect plan, you're setting yourself up for failure, really, even when you're executing, because there is no perfect plan. It's the biggest thing that you can have is actually adaptation, to be able to adapt to a situation or circumstance, and that's far greater skill to have than to be able to make a perfect plan, which will never happen, right? There's just way too many variables that will throw you off. So sitting there and planning before moving is a big mistake, which happens. I think actually, if we link this back to the last one, number 4, which is the mistake gap, you begin to pursue a goal or something like that, right? And then you fail, right? And then you become afraid. So when you become afraid, you want to step back in. You really want to be ambitious and step back in. But that failure, and I'm actually talking about my own personal experience. I have had a lot of failures, and I've been hindered big time by some of these failures, because what happened was I failed and I said, okay, I want to get back in, but I want to do it right. Right, so I'm falling into the trap. I'm like, I want to do that right. I want to do it right. I want to do it perfect. I want to just nail it down. And then what happens? Years later, I haven't done anything but plan. Just preparing to do for years and years, but with no forward movement, no forward action, right? So that's a lot of times this perfection actually is actually not being a perfectionist. It actually comes from fear, right? A fear of making a mistake, right? So this perfection gap is actually holding you back because of a fear of making a mistake. So you have to have this level of perfection, right? So it's actually not being a perfectionist, right? It's actually being fearful, right? And that's exactly what I believe that's what perfectionism is because you're just afraid, right? So you need to adapt and overcome, right? A very interesting, very interesting reality series that I was watching, Manhunt. I don't know if you guys have heard of that, but it's a Navy SEAL, and he goes against elite tracking forces. And sometimes he doesn't make it, right? Sometimes he gets captured, but he makes it pretty darn close to the end every single time. But these are elite trackers, right? And there's a group of them, and he's by himself, right? So, but when you watch this guy, you realize, man, he runs into a circumstance. He doesn't plan the whole thing, although he has a plan. He knows his objective. He knows his extraction point, but he's never seen the terrain. He's never been there. So he knows what to do. He takes action. He's got this plan in his head, and he'll encounter something. And with every situation that he encounters, he creates a plan on the spot, and then he executes on that plan. And then once the circumstance changes, let's say the pursuers are right behind him or something like that, he has to, on the spot, change his plan, right? And then gets to another point. He sees something in the environment that he could use. The plan again changes, right? And this is what a successful movement looks like to me, is there's a continual movement and planning simultaneously at the same time. The environment and the circumstances creates the plan. Right, so you create a plan based on that environment and circumstance is what I'm getting from watching, just the mindset and the behavior. And then as a response, you create the plan. And then you're moving, and then as a response, another event comes. As a response, you create the plan. And then you're moving on that plan, and then environment gives you a response, and then you create the plan. Right? That's actually what it looks more like to me. Now, this is interesting. So I'm watching another reality show, and it's called Undercover, Billionaire. Okay, and I'm watching this guy. I'm watching these two shows back to back, side by side. Okay, so I'm watching one show, and then I'm going to watch the other show, and I'm watching this guy. And this Undercover Billionaire is a cool reality show, and he's saying, he can build in 90 days. He could build $1 million business starting with $100. Okay, so I'm watching this guy. And it's the same thing. He's doing the exact same thing. He's put into a circumstance, and then he creates a plan. So it's not like he knows his outcome, but the situation, what does it give him? Okay, he's looking for, in the beginning, I'm watching this, and he's like, well, first of all, I need to figure out a living expense. He has $100 right now. He's living out of his truck, right? So the circumstance is a small town. It looks kind of like an industrial kind of place. So he's looking for, how to make money right now. Now he can get a job, but it's not really quick. So what does he do? He looks for something like tires, that big giant tractor tires that he could sell, and then he makes money, right? And then he encounters another guy, because he's trying to learn. He's doing some market research on the area. So he's talking to this guy that prints shirts. So that's a circumstance. He created this circumstance. So he meets this guy, makes a connection, and then it's St. Patrick's Day. So this guy's making shirts. He calls him and says, "Hey, let's take your shirts and sell it, and other green apparel, and sell it on St. Patrick's Day." So he's using that event to create a plan, and it's the same thing. Whether you're talking about surviving pursuers as a Navy SEAL, or surviving in the everyday, the planning process to me looks very similar. So, you can't wait for that perfect plan. You got to execute and plan on the event given, right? So anyways, it might be a little bit off, but I'm talking about the perfection gap. It says right here, I have to find the best way before I start. That's incorrect. You need to start, right? That's what he's saying, that this is not the right way. That's a thinking. That's the gap. Is we need to find the best way before we start. No, we need to start and then create a plan, and that's the best way. All right, so we're 10 minutes in, and that's it on the perfection gap. So I'll post another one. The next one is going to be the inspiration gap. We'll talk about that next time. All right, see you later, guys.